Chapter 18. After time reverses, Link immediately heads for the ocean again. He plays Epona's song, and in the distance, the familiar sound of galloping hooves grows louder as Epona rushes to his side. Without hesitation, Link swings onto her back and spurs her forward, riding across Termina Field toward the beach. The journey is swift. Link knows exactly where to go this time. Upon reaching the shore, he dismounts, retrieves the Zora mask, and presses it to his face. The painful transformation is brief, and soon he dives into the water of the Great Bay, his powerful strokes carrying him effortlessly through the waves. The currents guide him back to Zora Hall, where this time, the atmosphere is livelier. Inside, Zoras bustle about, preparing the concert hall for an upcoming performance. As Link walks through the Great Hall, many of the Zoras recognize him, believing him to be Mikau, and call out, asking about the eggs, but there is far less urgency in their voices. Moving past them, Link makes his way toward the back of the hall, stepping out onto the balcony overlooking the ocean. There, standing motionless, is Lulu. Her gaze is fixed on the horizon, her expression distant and sorrowful. She turns her head slightly at the sound of footsteps, but remains silent, as if lost in thought. Link steps forward, unslinging his fishbone guitar from his back. She takes little notice as he begins to play the melody he had learned from the newborn Zora. The soft, flowing notes fill the air, blending with the ocean breeze. At the sound of the song, something shifts in Lulu's expression. Her eyes widen in recognition, and slowly, instinctively, she parts her lips. A voice, beautiful and melodic, joins the music. It is hesitant at first, as though she herself is unsure, but then it grows stronger, more confident. The melody builds and Lulu sings, her voice carrying out over the waves. Although the Zora eggs were not saved in this timeline, the song they taught was still powerful and true. The moment is magical. Her voice, lost for so long, has finally returned. As the final notes of their song fade into the salty ocean breeze, Lulu turns to Link, her voice hesitant but warm, as if finally waking from a long dream. Just as she begins to speak, the ground beneath them trembles. A deep rumbling echoes from the ocean, and a powerful surge of water erupts into the sky. From beneath the waves, an enormous figure rises, a giant turtle, its shell covered in moss and coral, as if it had slumbered for centuries. Its massive eyes, wise and ancient, settle upon them as it lets out a great yawn. Ah, what a beautiful song! The turtle rumbles, his voice deep and slow, filled with wisdom. It has been some time since I have heard such a melody. It has stirred me from my dreams. Lulu takes a step back, startled by the sudden appearance of the great creature. Her voice, still regaining its strength, is laced with confusion. What? What is happening? The turtle shifts slightly in the water, sending ripples across the sea. He then turns his gaze toward Link, his large eyes studying him intently. Though I may sleep, my eyes remain open. I have seen all that has transpired in these waters. A terrible disturbance brews within the Great Bay Temple, an unnatural tempest rages, poisoning the sea. The ocean has need of your strength, young hero. I shall take you there, warrior of the tides. Climb upon my back, and we shall journey through the storm. Lulu looks at Link, still believing him to be Mikau, her concern evident. Mikau, what is happening? Her fingers clutch the fabric of her dress, uncertainty in her voice. The turtle speaks again, his voice gentle yet firm. Fear not, young one. He goes where he is needed, as he always has. He then shifts in the water, lowering himself so that Link can climb aboard. Understanding that hesitation would only waste time, Link moves forward, stepping onto the turtle's massive shell. As soon as he is secure, the great turtle begins to move, its powerful limbs pushing through the waves. Lulu watches in silence as they disappear into the horizon, the ocean winds carrying them toward the raging storm that looms over the Great Bay Temple. The wind howled around Link as he gripped the rough shell of the great turtle, his body rising and falling with each powerful stroke through the turbulent waves. Rain lashed at his face, the salty spray of the ocean mixing with the stinging downpour. The once distant storm now surrounded them, its swirling winds growing fiercer with every passing moment. The turtle moved forward undeterred, his massive form cutting through the churning sea, but Link struggled to keep his footing. The winds tugged at him, threatening to throw him into the violent waters below. Realizing he couldn't hold on like this, Link reached for his mask and removed it. The familiar pull of transformation washed over him as he returned to his normal form, his grip immediately feeling stronger without the Zora's smooth skin. Thinking quickly, he grabbed his hookshot and fired it at the base of a sturdy tree growing from the turtle's back. The chain tightened, anchoring him in place as he crouched low, shielding himself from the relentless storm. The turtle pressed onward, undaunted by the raging winds and crashing waves. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity, until finally, the storm began to subside. The chaotic winds grew still, and the rain eased into a gentle drizzle. Before them, shrouded in mist, stood a massive structure rising from the water, Great Bay Temple. Its metallic exterior gleamed under the gray sky, an unnatural fortress in the heart of the ocean. The turtle swam into a calmer bay within the temple's outer structure, stopping at a metal dock that extended from the base of the looming facility. Link unhooked himself from the tree and climbed onto the dock, his boots clanking against the cold metal. The turtle turned his head slightly, regarding Link with knowing eyes. The currents here are twisted and unnatural. The waters within this temple no longer flow as they should, he rumbled. You must set things right. Link nodded, gripping his sword's hilt. The turtle gave a slow, solemn nod in return. Go forth, warrior of the tides. May the ocean guide your path. With that, the great turtle turned and began to sink beneath the waves, disappearing into the depths. Link took a deep breath, steeling himself, and stepped forward into the heart of the temple. Well, Tal said, no turning back now. Chapter 19. Link steps through the door into a massive chamber, and the sound of rushing water fills his ears. The room is vast, with towering metal walls lined with massive pipes, some gushing water in steady streams while others pulse as if struggling under pressure. The air is thick with mist from the constant flow, and the rhythmic churning of unseen mechanisms gives the place the feel of an ancient, living machine. The currents shift in intervals, almost like clockwork, surging and then receding, as if the temple itself is breathing. Tattle hovers beside him, observing the shifting tides. These old mechanisms are still functioning, she mutters. It's all moving water, but there's a pattern to it. Link steps closer to the edge of the platform, peering into the water below. The currents twist and coil like unseen hands, powerful and relentless. At Tattle's suggestion, he pulls out the Zora mask and presses it to his face. Instantly, the mask latches onto him, and with a familiar jolt of pain, his body shifts into the sleek form of a Zora. Without hesitation, Link dives into the water, immediately feeling the powerful current seize him. The force is overwhelming, pushing and pulling at him unpredictably. He fights against it, trying to swim forward, but every motion is met with resistance. He braces himself against a metal grate on the floor, waiting for a lull in the current, then pushes off, using his fins to propel himself forward. Ahead, an underwater tunnel looms, barely visible through the churning water. Summoning all his strength, Link kicks off with a burst of speed, cutting through the current just as another surge threatens to drag him back. He barely makes it, gripping the edge of the tunnel's opening and pulling himself inside. The noise of the rushing water fades slightly as he swims forward, deeper into the unknown. Link pulls himself out of the water, dripping as he steps onto a damp metal platform. Before him stretches an even larger chamber, where the air hums with the deep, mechanical groan of massive water wheels turning. The wheels, ancient yet still functional, churn ceaselessly, drawing water through intricate channels and pushing it into unseen depths. The sheer scale of the machinery is overwhelming, the walls lined with pipes and gears, all moving with precise, rhythmic motion. He doesn't have time to marvel at the craftsmanship. He leaps back into the water, letting the strong current grab hold of him. The force is almost too much, but he stays focused, angling his body to control his descent as he's pulled through another tunnel. The tunnel narrows, the pressure building until suddenly, he's shot out into a smaller room, where the water settles into a shallow pool. Link wades forward and steps onto solid ground, shaking off excess water. As soon as he does, a scuttling noise makes him tense. The moment he pulls off the Zora mask, returning to his Hylian form, a Tektite leaps toward him, its spindly legs clicking against the floor. Link sidesteps just in time, slashing with his sword as the blue creature recoils from the strike. It hops again, but this time Link meets it midair, cutting it down before it can land. Before he can breathe, a cluster of choo-choos, gelatinous and wobbling, emerge from a corner. 2 of them are green, but 1 is red, sparking with magic. Link readies his shield as the red choo-choo jolts forward, releasing a small electrical charge. He waits for an opening, then swings his sword, slicing through the harmless ones before quickly drawing his bow to pick off the red one from a safe distance. The arrow strikes true, bursting the creature into flickering embers. The moment the last choo-choo disappears, an Octorok, half submerged in a small pool of water, gurgles and spits a rock toward him. Link raises his shield, deflecting the shot right back at the creature, striking its rubbery head. It lets out a final croak before sinking beneath the water. The room now silent, Link exhales, scanning the area. With the threats taken care of, he spots a rusted metal door ahead. Brushing off the last of the fight, he grips the handle and pushes it open, stepping into whatever awaits him next. As Link steps forward, the heavy door slams shut behind him with a deep, metallic clang. The room is eerily still, filled with ankle-deep water that barely ripples beneath his boots. The walls glisten with moisture, and the air is thick with the smell of damp metal and stagnant water. A strange unease settles in his stomach. Then, Tattle's voice pierces the silence. "Link! The ceiling!" Link snaps his head up just in time to see a grotesque shape lurking above, a massive, pulsating eyeball wreathed in a swirling mass of pink, gelatinous bubbles. The moment its unblinking gaze meets his, the creature plummets from the ceiling, hitting the water with a thunderous splash. Waves ripple outward as the giant eye, Wart, shudders, its protective bubbles swarming around it like a living shield. Link doesn't hesitate. He unslings his hook shot, aiming for the writhing mass. He fires, the chain shoots forward, latching onto one of the bubbles. With a swift yank, the hooked bubble is pulled from its orbit, popping with a sharp snap as it splatters onto the wet ground. Wart twitches as if irritated, and the bubbles swirl faster, creating an almost impenetrable barrier. Link moves quickly, dodging as the monster lurches forward, sending its deadly bubbles outward in bursts. They shoot through the air like darts, forcing him to duck and roll to avoid their unpredictable flight patterns. He fires the hook shot again, pulling another bubble free, then another, thinning Wart's defenses little by little. But the monster is relentless. Each time Link clears a gap, it spins wildly, forcing him to retreat or risk being trampled. Wart suddenly rears back, then lunges, the remaining bubbles slamming down like a tidal wave. Link barely manages to leap out of the way, skidding through the shallow water as the bubbles explode on impact. He grits his teeth, adjusting his grip on the hook shot, and fires twice in quick succession, tearing away the last few layers of protection. The moment the final bubble pops, Wart lets out a shrill, gurgling cry, its massive eye now fully exposed. Seizing the chance, Link dashes forward, sword in hand. He leaps, bringing his blade down in a powerful strike. The sword slices through the soft, fleshy iris and Wart convulses violently. The creature thrashes, knocking Link back as it flails in agony. Its eye turns bloodshot, its movements becoming more erratic. Link readies himself, dodging another wild charge before rolling beneath its massive bulk. With one final lunge, he drives his sword straight into the center of the eye. Wart lets out a horrible, guttural shriek before it bursts apart, dissolving into nothing as its foul energy fades. The last remnants of the bubbles pop harmlessly in the air, leaving only rippling water and silence in their wake. Tattle flutters beside him, catching her breath. That thing was disgusting. Link exhales, shaking off the tension. Then, with the room now safe, he turns his attention to the newly unlocked door ahead, ready to see what lies in store. Chapter 20. Link pushes open the heavy metal door, stepping into a smaller chamber dimly lit by flickering torches mounted on the damp walls. A single ornate chest sits in the center, its golden trim gleaming under the firelight. He approaches cautiously, feeling the lingering tension from the battle with Wart still coursing through him. With a firm tug, he lifts the chest's lid. A cool rush of magic pulses through the air as he pulls out a new weapon, the ice arrows. The crystalline arrowheads shimmer with an icy glow, the cold energy radiating through his fingertips. Tattle flutters beside him, her light reflecting off the frozen tips. I bet we can use these to move the flow of water. Link nods, tucking them into his quiver before turning back the way he came. Retracing his steps through the temple, he surveys the vast mechanical contraptions, the constant motion of gears and rushing water creating an overwhelming labyrinth of moving parts. But now, with the ice arrows in hand, he has a way to shift the flow. Spotting a massive waterfall cascading down from a rusted pipe above, he readies his bow and nocks an ice arrow. He takes aim and fires. The arrow strikes the water mid-fall, instantly freezing a section into a solid platform of ice. The water behind it struggles to push forward, but the frozen chunk disrupts the flow, causing the nearby gears to grind to a halt. A deep clang echoes through the chamber as machinery seizes, and the powerful currents that once pulled him under begin to slow. Encouraged, Link moves to another area, targeting more falling streams. Each precise shot sends another section of water into a frozen stasis, shifting the mechanics of the temple piece by piece. He watches as pathways that were once unreachable become accessible, while dangerous currents weaken, making the treacherous waters easier to navigate. Tattle hovers beside him, watching the transformation unfold. This place might be a mess, but you're figuring it out fast. Link takes a steadying breath, gripping his bow tighter. With the temple's waterworks bending to his will, he's now ready to push forward, deeper into its mysteries. Link moves through the vast chambers of the temple, carefully observing the intricate mechanisms that control the flow of water. With each shot of his ice arrows, he freezes streams mid-fall, jamming gears and altering currents. The sound of grinding metal and shifting machinery echoes through the halls as the temple begins to change, its pathways opening to him. In one room, a powerful current had once blocked his way, dragging him back whenever he tried to swim through. Now, with the gears halted and the rushing water slowed, he dives in with confidence. The moment he touches the water, he shifts into his Zora form, feeling the familiar rush of energy as his body adapts to the depths. He kicks off the stone floor, slicing through the water effortlessly, weaving through submerged tunnels now passable thanks to his efforts. Glowing fish dart past him, illuminating the murky waters as he navigates through twisting passages. He follows the gentle pull of the currents, only to suddenly feel a force much stronger than expected, an unnatural whirlpool forming beneath him. Before he can react, the water yanks him downward in a spiraling vortex. Tattle shouts in alarm as Link is pulled deeper and deeper, his body twisting through the churning water. He struggles against it, but the force is too great. The tunnel widens, and suddenly, he is thrown out into an enormous chamber. The first thing he notices is the vast pool of water that dominates the room. Dim blue light filters through unseen openings above, casting shifting patterns on the stone walls. The surface of the pool is eerily calm, the water too still, unnaturally so. Then, the silence breaks. A deep, guttural rumble vibrates through the chamber, making the very walls tremble. Link barely has time to react before the water explodes upward in a violent surge. A massive shadow rises from the depths, breaking through the surface in a sudden, monstrous leap. A giant, masked fish launches into the air, its thick body covered in armored scales. Its gaping mouth opens wide, rows of razor-sharp teeth visible beneath the strange tribal mask covering its face. Water cascades off its massive form as it twists midair before crashing back into the pool with a thunderous splash. The force sends waves rippling across the chamber, pushing Link back. He staggers as the masked creature circles beneath the surface, its glowing eyes locking onto him from below. Tattle hovers closer, her voice tense. Is that Jorg? Something looks wrong. Be careful, Link. The water swirls, the beast lurking just beneath. Then, with terrifying speed, it surges forward, heading straight for him. The masked fish lunges, its massive jaws snapping shut just as Link dives aside. Water splashes against the chamber walls, and the ground trembles from the impact. Tattle zips around frantically. Watch it, Link. It could swallow you whole. Link doesn't wait. He pulls out his bow and knocks an ice arrow. The beast circles beneath the water, its mask barely visible through the murky depths. He fires. The arrow strikes the water's surface, instantly freezing a patch of it. But the fish is too fast. It bursts through the ice, sending shards flying in every direction. Thinking quickly, Link pulls on his Zora mask. His body shifts, fins extending as he plunges into the water. As soon as he's submerged, the beast whirls toward him, its powerful tail propelling it forward. Link flips, narrowly dodging the creature's charge, feeling the rush of water as it misses him by inches. He extends his arm, clashing his sharp fins against the creature. His fins strike the mask, causing the fish to roar in frustration. It turns sharply, whipping its tail toward Link. He barely manages to cross his arms in time, his hardened fins blocking the strike, but the force sends him tumbling through the water. Realizing he needs a different approach, Link kicks toward the surface, breaking through and pulling off the Zora mask mid-motion. He lands on a floating platform, bow already drawn. The fish circles below, then rockets upward. Link leaps just in time, its massive body launching out of the water beneath him. As he falls, he switches to his hook shot, searching for any sign of weakness, firing it directly at the mask. The chain latches onto its surface, pulling Link toward the beast. He flips onto its back, grabbing hold of its rough scales. The fish thrashes wildly, trying to throw him off. Gritting his teeth, Link draws his sword and drives it into the creature's unarmored flesh. A deafening screech fills the chamber as the fish flails in pain. It slams back into the water, and Link is forced to let go, diving deep as it writhes in agony. He pulls the Zora mask back on, dashing through the water as the beast slows, its movement sluggish. Seeing his chance, he charges his fin blades with magical energy and dashes forward. He slams into the wounded beast, sending a powerful shockwave through its body. The fish convulses violently, its mask cracking as it lets out a final, gurgling cry. Then, with a final, shuddering twitch, the massive fish sinks into the depths. The water grows still once more. Link swims to the surface, gasping for air as he pulls himself onto the platform. Tattle flutters beside him. You did it. That was terrifying. Then, in the water, something appears, a mask, floating gently on the surface. The remains of the fallen creature. Link steps forward, his breath steadying. He reaches down and lifts the mask from the water, feeling its strange power in his hands. The temple had been cleansed. Chapter 21. Link's vision blurs the moment his fingers graze the mask. The world around him dissolves into light, and suddenly he's standing in an empty void, balanced atop a massive purple column stretching endlessly into the fog. A low hum fills the air, a sound both ancient and familiar. Tattle flutters beside him, her glow flickering as she looks around. From the swirling mist, a colossal shape emerges, a towering figure, similar to the last, but its features remain hazy, just beyond sight. A deep, resonant voice rumbles through the void, speaking in words Link cannot fully grasp, yet their meaning lingers in his mind. We were friends once. Link stares up at the towering being, confusion mixing with understanding. The words seem directed at him, yet they carry the weight of something older, something forgotten. Tattle hovers closer. Friends. Could they mean with Skull Kid? Her voice is uncertain, but there's a hint of recognition. If they were his friends, then maybe they really can help us. The giant shifts, its voice becoming clearer, its presence filling the space around them. A deep, mournful melody begins to take shape, the notes echoing through the void. Link reaches for his ocarina, sensing that this is a song of great importance. He raises the instrument to his lips and plays along, mirroring the giant's notes. The melody weaves through the fog, resonating in the vast emptiness. But before the song can be completed, the vision begins to shatter. The void trembles. The giant's form fades into the mist. Tattle gasps, "No, wait. We need to know." The world rushes back in a blinding flash, and suddenly, Link is standing once more in the Great Bay Temple, mask in hand. The air is still, the temple's waters now calm. The battle is over, but the weight of the unfinished song lingers in his mind. Tattle is silent for a long moment before whispering, "Let's go." Link tucks the mask away, feeling the weight of its power settle alongside the others. As he steps out of the temple, a quiet stillness greets him. The violent storm that had once surrounded the temple is gone, leaving behind a calm, moonlit ocean. The dark waves ripple gently under the night sky, and in the distance, Zora Cape glows faintly under the stars. Taking a breath, Link pulls on the Zora mask once more. The transformation is quick, and he dives into the water, cutting through the now tranquil sea with powerful strokes. The once turbulent currents no longer fight against him, making the journey back swift. As he reaches the shore of Zora Cape, he spots Lulu and the rest of the band waiting just outside the hall. They cheer as they see him approach, rushing forward with relieved smiles. There he is. Joppas calls, strumming his bass with a grin. "You're back, Macau. That must mean you took care of everything, huh?" "Told you he'd pull through," Taijo adds, spinning his drumsticks between his fingers. "The ocean's back to normal, and, look, Lulu's voice is back, too." Lulu nods, her expression softer than the others, but a quiet warmth lingers in her eyes. "The eggs," she starts, her voice still uncertain. Link remains silent, unsure of how to respond. The eggs were safe once. In this timeline, the eggs were still held hostage by the Gerudo pirates. It was something that they would not understand and would forget in time. His silence doesn't seem to concern them. If Lulu can sing again, that must mean everything worked out, right? Evan says, adjusting his keyboard. And after all that, I'd say we have something to celebrate. Joppa slaps a hand on Link's back, nearly pushing him forward. "Come on, man. We've been waiting to warm up for the big show. You're not getting out of this one." Link hesitates, but the others have already made up their minds. Before he can protest, they're guiding him back into the hall, their instruments in hand. The stage is set, lanterns glowing warmly around them, the gentle sound of waves lapping against the shore. As he picks up his fishbone guitar, Link glances at Tattle. She hovers nearby, her tiny wings flickering in the dim light. He expects her to argue, to insist they don't have time for this, but she just sighs, resigned. With that, the band begins to play, filling the night with music. The melody rises and falls, carrying across the ocean, a song of celebration under the moonlit sky. For a moment, Link allows himself to be part of it, strumming along as the music flows through him. The night stretches on, and for the first time in what feels like forever, the weight of his journey eases, just a little. Chapter 22. The rhythmic clatter of Epona's hooves echoed across the open field as Link rode through the night, the soft glow of Clock Town's torches visible in the distance. The second night was nearing its end, and time was slipping away. Tattle flitted beside him, clearly relieved to be heading back. "We've got a lot to do still," she muttered. "No more distractions, all right?" But just as she said it, a strange melody drifted through the cool night air. It was eerie, otherworldly, unlike anything Link had heard before. It came from the north, beyond the hills and trees that bordered the field. Link tugged on Epona's reins, steering her toward the sound. "Hey, what are you doing?" Tattle groaned. "We don't have time for this." But Link was already moving toward the source, curiosity outweighing the fairy's protests. As he crested a small hill, he saw him. A lone figure, pale and ghostly, danced under the moonlight. His movements were fluid and mesmerizing, his bare feet never touching the grass as he twirled and leapt in place. The eerie tune seemed to come from nowhere, as though it were part of the night itself. The spirit turned to Link without pausing his dance. His expression was solemn, yet his eyes burned with a passion that defied death. "I am Camero," he intoned, his voice echoing strangely. "In life, I was a dancer without equal, my steps a gift to the world. Yet I passed before I could share my greatest dance. My soul lingers restless, for my art must not fade with me." His movements became more frantic, as if willing his dance to live on through sheer force of will. Then he stopped suddenly, staring at Link with intensity. Link recognized the plea in Camero's voice. He reached for his ocarina, its familiar weight comforting in his hands. Closing his eyes, he played the song of healing. As the melody filled the air, Camero's form flickered, his body shimmering with light. His expression softened, his frenzied energy fading into peace. "Yes, this is right," he whispered, his body dissolving into golden motes. "You have freed my soul, and now my dance shall live on through you." The light coalesced into a strange mask, one shaped like Camero's face. It pulsed with warmth as Link picked it up, as though the dancer's spirit remained within it, waiting to be shared. As the last traces of Camero vanished into the night, Tatl hovered closer, her tone softer than before. "A strange spirit. What do you plan to do with this?" she asked. Link tucked the mask away before mounting Epona once more. The song of the ghostly dancer still echoed in his mind as he rode back toward Clock Town, the second night slipping away behind him. As the sun rose on the dawn of the third day, Link and Tatl entered Clock Town, only to find it in utter chaos. The once bustling streets were filled with panicked townsfolk, many of them hastily packing their belongings or frantically searching for a way to escape. Above them, the monstrous moon loomed closer than ever, its twisted grin seeming almost triumphant in its descent. Tatl let out a sigh, hovering beside Link. "Well, there's no way we're making it to the canyon today," she muttered, her voice laced with frustration. "All these distractions waste too much time." She glanced up at the sky, then sighed again. "Guess we might as well rest up before resetting everything." She fluttered ahead toward the inn. "Come on, let's use that room again." The Stockpot Inn was quieter than before, the usual chatter of travelers replaced by the distant murmurs of those resigned to their fate. Link stepped inside, and behind the counter stood a different woman than before, a more mature presence, her tired eyes betraying the weight of the situation. Tatl floated up to the counter. "We'd like our room," she said. The woman looked at them, surprised. "You want a room? At a time like this?" She hesitated, then pulled out a large logbook, flipping through the pages. "Well, that's strange," she murmured. "It says here that Mr. Link already checked in 2 days ago and left yesterday." Tatl jolted. "Wait, what?" She turned to Link, bewildered. "But we never checked in." Then, after a pause, she slowly nodded. "Oh, so that room did belong to someone. I feel kind of bad, taking someone else's room, although I guess that technically didn't happen." She hovered erratically, getting frustrated. "It's all getting so confusing." She turned back to Link. "Guess the room is out." Her wings flickered slightly. "Whatever. Let's just take a break." Despite the unsettling mystery, exhaustion was catching up to them. Link nodded and followed Tatl to a nearby bench and sat back relaxed. The morning light creeped into the streets of Clock Town as the moon loomed ever closer. Link sat on a bench in the dimly lit hallway of the inn, resting as the muffled sounds of the town's panic echoed through the walls. His eyes were half closed when a steady rhythm of footsteps caught his attention. The Rosa sisters were pacing up and down the hall, their strides quicker than before, their hushed voices filled with worry. "What are we going to do?" one of them muttered, her hands clenched at her sides. "The carnival is soon, and we still don't have a dance," the other replied in frustration. Link straightened up, remembering the strange mask Camero had left behind. He reached into his pouch and pulled it out, a blank, almost featureless mask with a small, eerie figure of Camaro perched atop it. Tattle fluttered beside him and snickered. "Oh, now that's a look." Ignoring her, Link placed the mask on his face. The moment it settled, his body jerked forward involuntarily. His feet slid into position, arms raised. Then, without meaning to, he began to dance. His movements were fluid yet hypnotic, his body twisting and swaying with an unnatural grace. His arms extended in sweeping motions, his legs shifting in a rhythmic, mesmerizing pattern. His feet barely touched the ground as he spun, his body moving as if possessed by the spirit of Camaro himself. The flickering lantern light in the hall cast elongated shadows of his silhouette against the walls, making his figure appear almost otherworldly. The pacing stopped. One of the Rosa sisters turned, her eyes widening. "What?" The other stepped forward, captivated. "That dance." They both watched in silence, their breath held as Link's movements intensified, an elegant display of control and passion, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next. Then, with one final dramatic sweep of his arms, Link struck a final pose. The air in the hallway felt heavy with the lingering presence of the dance. For a moment, the sisters said nothing. Then, they erupted into applause. "That was incredible," one of them exclaimed. The other clapped her hands together, eyes shining. "It's perfect. That's the dance we'll perform at the carnival." They turned to Link, beaming. "Thank you so much. We won't forget this." Tattle hovered beside him, shaking her head. "Well, that was unexpected, but I guess you didn't waste time this time." Link simply nodded, feeling the mask's strange energy fade as he removed it. The Rosa sisters, now brimming with excitement, hurried off to practice, leaving Link and Tattle once again in the quiet of the inn. Chapter 23. As time reset once more, the sky over Termina returned to a soft blue, the towering moon now distant and unmoving. With Epona's hooves pounding against the dirt, Link rode swiftly across Termina Field toward the east, where the land gave way to barren rock and dust, Ikana Canyon, their last destination. The canyon stretched before him, a vast, arid landscape of craggy cliffs and jagged outcroppings. The air was dry, carrying a faint, eerie whisper as the wind passed through the stone formations. The sun cast long shadows over the cracked earth, giving the canyon an ominous feel, as if the land itself remembered ancient sorrows. As Link urged Epona forward, sudden movement caught his eye. From crevices in the rocks, grotesque creatures skittered into view, real Bombchu. These monstrous, oversized rodents twitched erratically, their tails sparking with an eerie glow before erupting in violent explosions. Link tightened his grip on the reins. He spurred Epona into a sprint, weaving deftly between the erratic creatures. One darted too close, its tail igniting just as Link yanked the reins, guiding Epona into a sharp turn. The explosion sent a shockwave through the canyon, dust and debris scattering into the air. More of the creatures emerged, scuttling toward him with unpredictable movements. He leaned low against Epona's mane, trusting her sure footing as she leapt over a crumbling section of the path. Another Bombchu exploded behind them, the blast sending a shockwave that rattled the ground beneath them. Still, Link pressed on, expertly guiding his horse through the chaotic terrain until, at last, they reached a towering wall of stone. Atop the cliff, a lone figure stood, draped in a heavy cloak. The hood obscured most of their face, but beneath the shadow, Link caught the glint of sharp eyes. A gnarled staff rested against their shoulder, the figure's posture relaxed yet exuding an undeniable presence. A low chuckle echoed from beneath the hood. "Humph. A persistent traveler, yet words will not be shared." Tattle fluttered forward, clearly exasperated. "Oh, great. Another cryptic weirdo." The figure remained silent, the faintest hint of amusement lingering in their stance. Tattle huffed. Then, after a moment, she looked more intently at the figure. "Wait a second. I swear that looks familiar." Link remained still, studying the figure as the canyon wind howled between them. Tattle hovered closer, twitching with curiosity. "Wait a minute. That hood. It looks just like what those brothers were wearing. You know, The ones who attacked us with Creamia's wagon. Link's hand instinctively went to his satchel, pulling out the strange, tattered hood he had kept from one of the riders. He held it up for a moment before slipping it over his head. The fabric was rough, its edges frayed from wear, but it fit snugly. The cloaked figure tilted their head slightly. Then, without hesitation, they spoke, their voice calm and deliberate. "Ah, a fellow Garo, then." Without another word, the figure lifted their staff and struck it against the ground. A low rumble followed, and from the dry, cracked earth, a wooden stump rose, its surface worn and splintered with age. Link immediately understood. He readied his hook shot, aimed for the stump, and fired. The chain recoiled with a metallic snap, pulling him swiftly upward until he landed on the rocky ledge beside the cloaked figure. Now standing side by side, the figure turned to Link, their voice lowering to a more knowing tone. "Tread carefully, swordsman. This canyon does not welcome the living." Tattle hovered cautiously between them. "Oh, great, more ominous warnings." The figure chuckled lightly. "I see through your disguise, boy. You're no Garo." Link stiffened but remained silent. "Do not be alarmed," the figure continued. "So long as you wear that mask, you will be seen as one of us. It will serve you well in this forsaken place." With that, the mysterious figure stepped back into the shadows of the canyon, vanishing as if swallowed by the wind. Tattle shivered. "I really don't like this place." Link adjusted the hood, gripping the edge of his sword as he turned toward the path ahead. The entrance to the canyon loomed before them, steeped in eerie silence. Link pressed forward into the canyon, the towering cliffs around him twisting and turning like a labyrinth of stone. The eerie silence was only broken by the distant howl of the wind and the occasional clatter of loose pebbles tumbling down the rock face. Shadows stretched long across the cracked earth, shifting as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Tattle hovered close, her wings flickering uneasily. "I don't like this place, Link." "Something is." A sudden rustling came from beneath them. The ground trembled slightly before a figure burst forth from the earth, leaping into the air and landing with a graceful, predatory stance. Cloaked in dark robes, twin curved swords gleamed in its hands, catching the dim light. Its glowing eyes locked onto Link from beneath its hood. "I see. You wear the mask of my people," the figure rasped. "You're my master." "Or so I thought." The Garo hesitated, tilting its head as if sniffing the air. Then, with a sharp exhale, it tensed. "No, you're an imposter." Without warning, the Garo lunged, its blades flashing in the dim light. Link barely had time to raise his shield before the twin sword struck, sparks flying off the metal. The impact forced him back a step, but he quickly steadied himself. The Garo was fast, blindingly so, dashing in unpredictable arcs around Link before striking again. Link ducked under a wild swing and countered with a slash of his own, but the Garo twisted away, its robe flowing like a phantom in the wind. It came again, spinning through the air, swords aiming for Link's exposed side. He barely deflected the attack, feeling the force of it rattle through his arm. Tattle darted around the battlefield. "Link, don't let up. They're quick, but they're not invincible." Gritting his teeth, Link changed tactics. As the Garo dashed in for another strike, he pivoted and slashed low, catching the assassin mid-step. The blow sent it staggering back. Wasting no time, Link raised his sword and brought it down in a swift, decisive strike. The Garo gasped, its form faltering. The warrior stumbled, gripping its chest as it knelt. "Impressive. You have bested me. But even in death, we share our wisdom." It lifted a hand, pointing toward the winding cliffs ahead. "If you seek the path forward, cross the broken bridge. There you should find your way to the heart of Ikana." Link nodded, committing the words to memory. The Garo then reached into its cloak, pulling out a small explosive. "This is the way of the Garo." Before Link could react, the warrior slammed the bomb to the ground. A flash of fire and smoke erupted, forcing Link and Tattle to shield themselves. When the dust settled, nothing remained but the charred remnants of the warrior's cloak, fluttering in the wind. Link sheathed his sword and turned toward the direction the Garo had pointed. He approached the edge of the canyon, where a great chasm split the path in two. The remnants of the old bridge jutted out over the void, its stone supports crumbling and weathered by time. The wind howled through the gap, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and decay. Across the gorge, twisted dead trees clawed at the sky, their skeletal branches stark against the dull orange glow of the late afternoon sun. He reached for his hook shot, aiming for a sturdy-looking tree growing precariously from the cliffside on the other side. The chain shot out with a sharp hiss, the claw sinking deep into the bark. With a yank, Link was airborne, the wind whipping at his tunic as he soared across the chasm. He landed lightly on the other side, rolling forward to steady himself before standing and surveying the land before him. The path opened into a wide, barren field encircled by the sheer walls of the canyon. The ground was rough and lifeless, cracked with dry fissures, as if nothing had thrived here for centuries. Jagged rocks jutted from the earth, scattered like forgotten gravestones. A few dead trees stood as silent sentinels, their leafless limbs reaching toward the darkening sky. Along one side of the canyon wall, a massive metal gate loomed, rusted and bolted shut, its iron frame etched with strange, ancient symbols. And in the center of this desolate place stood a small house. The house was odd, cobbled together with warped wooden planks and cracked stone, as if it had been built hastily, without much care for design. The roof sagged slightly, and the windows were covered with thick wooden boards, leaving only thin gaps through which the dim light of the setting sun could barely seep in. A crooked fence of rotting posts surrounded it, though much of it had collapsed, making its purpose unclear. In front of the house, a small girl played, her bare feet kicking up dust as she drew shapes in the dirt with a stick. She couldn't have been older than 6 or 7. Her wild, unkempt hair fell over her face as she swung the stick around, mimicking the movements of a swordsman, lost in her own world. As Link stepped forward, she suddenly froze. Her head snapped up, her wide eyes locking onto him. Without hesitation, she gripped the stick tightly and took a defensive stance, holding it up like a weapon. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice small but firm. Her eyes were fierce, filled with an intensity far beyond her years. "Go away." Link stopped in his tracks, tilting his head in surprise. Tattle hovered beside him, blinking in confusion. The girl's grip on her makeshift weapon didn't waver as she narrowed her eyes at him. "I mean it. Don't come any closer." Realizing his appearance might be frightening, Link slowly reached up and removed the Garo mask. As soon as he did, the girl's expression shifted, her stance relaxed slightly, and she lowered the stick just a little. She started, her voice still wary, but no longer as sharp. She hesitated, then huffed, crossing her arms. "That doesn't mean you can stay. You should leave." Tattle flitted beside Link, whispering, "What's with this kid? She's not scared, but she sure doesn't want us here." Link remained still, watching the girl carefully. Whoever she was clearly used to keeping people away from this place. But why? The sun dipped lower behind the jagged canyon walls, casting long, eerie shadows over the desolate ground. The last golden light of day flickered against the metal gate, giving it an ominous glow before vanishing into the deepening dusk. The sky above darkened into a rich indigo, and the first stars began to pierce through the void. Then came the pounding. A heavy, rhythmic thud reverberated from inside the house, sending vibrations through the cracked earth. The girl flinched but quickly planted her feet firmly in front of the door, her stick still clutched tightly in her small hands. "Go away," she said again, but this time, her voice wasn't just defensive, it was desperate. Link took a slow step forward, watching her carefully. Before he could respond, the pounding stopped. A suffocating silence filled the air. Then the door burst open. A figure lurched into the doorway, its form shrouded in darkness. As it stepped forward into the dim moonlight, Link saw its decayed flesh wrapped tightly in aged, tattered bandages. The creature let out a guttural, otherworldly groan, its hollow eyes fixed upon him. A Gibdo. The air grew thick and heavy, filled with the sickly scent of decay. The creature staggered forward with slow, dragging steps. The girl tensed, her arms trembling. The Gibdo's gaze shifted to her, its low growl rumbling in the back of its throat. It stared for a moment, then turned away from her and began shuffling toward Link. Instinctively, Link reached for his sword. The metal glinted as he drew it, readying himself for battle. "No! Stop!" The girl's cry was piercing, cutting through the heavy air. Link hesitated, glancing at her in confusion. "That's my daddy," she wailed, her voice thick with emotion. Link's grip on his sword tightened. He looked back at the Gibdo, at the way it moved, the way its hands twitched, almost as if struggling against its own body. Through the gaps in its bandages, he could see traces of flesh, human flesh. This wasn't just a monster. Tattle gasped. "You mean, he was cursed?" The Gibdo shuddered, as if in pain, its steps faltering. Link lowered his sword, his eyes filled with understanding. Then, without a word, he reached into his pouch and pulled out his ocarina. The blue instrument gleamed under the pale moonlight as he raised it to his lips. A soft, haunting melody drifted through the canyon. The song of healing. As the notes wrapped around the night air, the Gibdo let out a guttural moan and clutched its head. Its body trembled violently, and an eerie glow surrounded it. The bandages unraveled, lifting away like wisps of smoke, and the rotting flesh beneath began to shift. The creature let out one final, tortured wail before, with a sudden flash, the last remnants of the Gibdo peeled away, falling to the ground with a hollow plunk. All that remained was a mask. A Gibdo mask, its vacant eyes staring up at Link from the dusty ground. Standing in its place was a man, thin, weary, his face lined with confusion and sorrow. His clothes were tattered, his hands shaking as he looked down at them as if seeing them for the first time in an eternity. What was I doing?" he murmured, his voice hoarse, as if unused for years. Before Link could answer, a scream pierced the air. "Daddy!" The little girl threw herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed into his ragged tunic. The man looked down at her, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. Slowly, he lowered himself to his knees and wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly as his own eyes welled with tears. Tattle hovered closer, watching the reunion in silence. After a moment, she whispered, "We should leave them be." Link nodded. Without a sound, he bent down, picked up the Gibdo mask and tucked it away. Then, he turned and stepped away, leaving them to their moment of peace. "Link," Tattle started, hovering close and speaking low. "I'm sorry. I know I've been rushing you and getting annoyed with you helping everyone, but I know you're the hero. That's your thing and you help people, but I just worry about Tail. You know? It feels like it's been so long since." Tattle's words drifted off, silence falling over them. As Link turned to leave, the father's voice called out after him. "Wait." Link paused and glanced back. The man had gently pulled away from his daughter and was now stepping toward him, his face still weary, but his eyes filled with gratitude and urgency. "I need to thank you," the man said, standing before Link. "If it weren't for you, He shook his head as if trying to shake off the memory of what had happened. "I lost myself. I got too close. I never thought the curse would consume me." Link tilted his head slightly, listening. The man took a deep breath and continued. "I'm a researcher. I study spirits, the undead, things that most people fear to even speak of. That's why I came to Ikana. I wanted to understand the Gibdos, to see if their existence had a purpose beyond wandering aimlessly. But I was reckless and," he trailed off, his hands tightening into fists. "Before I knew it, I had become one of them." Tattle hovered closer, her small wings flickering in the moonlight. "So you must know the area well. Do you know of a temple around here?" The father hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "I know a little." He turned and pointed toward the large metal gate embedded in the canyon wall. "That leads to the ruins of Ikana Castle, the heart of the Old Kingdom. Perhaps the temple you seek is there, but I am not certain." Tattle sighed. "Great. So we just waltz in?" The man gave a wry smile. "Not exactly. The castle is beyond that gate, but it will never budge. However, there's another way to reach it. He turned and pointed toward the dark, gaping mouth of a tunnel near the edge of the clearing. The Gibdo's Well. Link followed his gaze, staring at the black void of the tunnel's entrance. A faint, eerie moan echoed from within. The well is a labyrinth, the man continued. It stretches beneath the land, and the Gibdos wander its depths. I don't know the full path through, but his eyes drifted to the mask hanging at Link's side. That mask will help you. The Gibdos aren't particularly bright. If you wear it, they'll mistake you for one of their own. You should be able to move through their domain safely. Link reached down and brushed his fingers over the mask. Tattle sighed. So, you're saying we need to walk right into a den full of Gibdos? The man nodded solemnly. If you want to reach the castle, it's the only way. Tattle let out a small groan, then turned to Link. Well, I guess we don't have much of a choice, do we? Link gave a firm nod, then turned his gaze back toward the tunnel. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, but with the mask in hand, he had a way forward. Chapter 24. Link took a deep breath and stepped into the dark entrance of the well, the air immediately growing cold around him. As he descended, the last traces of moonlight from the canyon above faded away, leaving only the eerie glow of his fairy companion to light the way. The sound of his boots echoed off the damp stone walls, and an unsettling silence hung over the place like a heavy fog. The Gibdo's Well was a labyrinth, its winding tunnels carved from the earth long ago. The walls dripped with moisture, and the scent of decay lingered in the air. The passages twisted in unnatural ways, some leading to dead ends while others spiraled deeper underground. The stone was cracked and uneven, and in places, ancient wooden support beams creaked under the weight of the ground above. Link pulled the Gibdo's mask over his face. The moment he did, the change was immediate. The damp air felt heavier, and an odd sense of stillness settled over him. Tattle hovered beside him, whispering, "I really hate this place," but stayed close nonetheless. He moved carefully through the tunnels, his hand lightly brushing the stone wall to guide him. Shadows shifted at the edges of his vision, and then he saw them, Gibdos. Their wrapped, decayed forms shambled through the corridors, their hollow eyes barely acknowledging his presence. Every now and then, one would turn its head in his direction, letting out a dry, rasping moan, but they did not attack. The mask was working. Link pressed on, navigating through the winding tunnels, stepping over ancient bones and rusted weapons that littered the floor. Occasionally, he'd spot faint traces of old markings on the walls, symbols of the long-forgotten Ikana people. As he climbed deeper, he passed through strange chambers where more Gibdos stood motionless, their ragged bandages fluttering slightly in the cold air. He moved cautiously, his fingers gripping his sword hilt just in case. The low groaning of the undead filled the tunnels, but none made a move toward him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Link spotted a ladder leading up to a small opening above. He climbed, each rung cold beneath his fingers. As he pulled himself up, he emerged into blinding sunlight. The air here was dry and brittle, the scent of dust and stone filling his lungs. Link blinked as his eyes adjusted to the light, then turned to see where he had arrived. Before him stretched the ruins of Ikana Castle. The once great fortress stood in a vast courtyard, its towering walls now crumbling with age. Jagged stone spires reached toward the sky, their surfaces scarred by time and battle. The castle's architecture was unlike anything in Termina, ancient and regal, yet eerie, as if the very stones whispered of a tragic past. Massive stone pillars framed the grand entrance, their carvings eroded beyond recognition. The once majestic banners of Ikana hung in tatters, barely clinging to rusted iron poles. The wind howled through the ruins, creating an eerie melody that carried across the desolate landscape. The courtyard itself was cracked and lifeless, with patches of dried grass pushing through the fractured stone. A wide, dried-up moat surrounded the castle, its bottom littered with the skeletal remains of warriors long forgotten. Across the moat, the castle doors loomed, tall and foreboding, their wooden planks reinforced with tarnished metal. Tattle floated beside Link, her voice hushed. So, this is it. Ikana Castle. Link stepped forward, the weight of the ancient kingdom pressing down on him. Whatever secrets lay within these walls, they would not be revealed easily. Link pushed open the massive wooden doors of Ikana Castle, and they creaked loudly in protest. The moment he stepped inside, the air turned heavy, thick with the scent of dust and decay. The castle's interior was swallowed in darkness, with only a few beams of dim light seeping through the cracks in the high, vaulted ceiling. The stone walls were adorned with faded carvings, their stories lost to time. The moment his boots hit the cold floor, an eerie groan filled the chamber. Link froze. From the shadows, lifeless figures began to stir. Redeads and Gibdos stood slumped against the walls, their vacant eyes now fixated on him. The shrill wails of the Redeads pierced the silence, and Link's muscles tensed as the creatures staggered toward him with stiff, unnatural movements. Tatl whispered urgently, "Move. Don't let their scream freeze you in place." Link darted forward, weaving through the room as the undead lurched toward him. He kept his pace quick, stepping over broken floor tiles and maneuvering around fallen pillars. Whenever a Gibdo blocked his path, he ducked low and rolled past, avoiding unnecessary fights. The less noise he made, the better. But in the next corridor, the narrow walls worked against him. A Gibdo staggered out of an alcove, blocking his escape. Before he could retreat, another approached from behind, its bandaged arms reaching for him. With no other choice, Link gripped his sword and lashed out, slashing the Gibdo in front of him. The creature groaned and recoiled, but it wasn't enough to stop it. With a second, stronger strike, the Gibdo collapsed into dust. He whirled around just as the other lunged for him, but Link quickly spun, slicing through its bandages in a clean, decisive blow. The undead crumbled, leaving the passage clear once more. Tatl let out a breath. "I hate this place." Pressing on, Link reached a large chamber lined with cracked pillars and ornate stonework. In the center of the room sat two massive stone blocks, ancient symbols carved into their surfaces. Link examined them, then pressed his hands against the rough stone and pushed with all his strength. The blocks scraped loudly as they slid across the floor, revealing a hidden passageway behind them. Inside the hidden room, dust swirled in the dim torchlight. Against the far wall, a large chest sat waiting, its gold trim glinting faintly in the flickering glow. Link approached cautiously, unlatched the lock, and lifted the heavy lid. Inside lay an ornate shield, its surface polished and gleaming like a mirror. The frame was crafted from a deep, dark metal, but the center was a perfect reflective surface, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. As Link lifted it, an eerie yet powerful energy coursed through his fingers. Tatl gasped. "That's a mirror shield." Link strapped the shield onto his arm, testing its weight. It felt solid, yet lighter than expected compared to the mirror shield he remembered. He turned toward one of the torches, raising the shield experimentally. The moment the firelight hit its surface, a brilliant beam of light reflected forward, illuminating the opposite wall with intense brightness. The wall, made of aged, brittle stone, began to crumble under the searing light. Large chunks of rock cracked and fell away, revealing a new hidden passage leading deeper into the castle. Tatl hovered beside him. "Well, we know that it works." With his new shield in hand, Link stepped forward, ready to uncover the deeper mysteries of Ikana Castle. Link stepped cautiously through the newly revealed passage, his boots echoing softly against the stone floor. The air felt different here, less stagnant, though still thick with the weight of time. He emerged into a vast chamber, far grander than any he had seen before in the castle. Faint beams of morning light filtered through the tall, arched windows, casting long, golden streaks across the crumbling stone. What must have once been a majestic royal hall now lay in ruin. The tapestries were torn and faded, the wooden beams overhead sagging under centuries of neglect. At the far end of the chamber, atop a wide stone platform, stood an ornate throne, its gilded edges dulled with age, its seat empty. Tatl whispered, "This place. It must have belonged to the old king of Ikana." Link took a few careful steps forward, his gaze scanning the chamber. The silence here was unnerving. Too still. Then, without warning, a deep tremor shook the hall. Dust fell from the rafters. The ground rumbled, and with a heavy, echoing crash, the tattered curtains hanging from the ceiling descended, blocking out the morning light. Darkness spread across the room. A chilling gust of wind swept through the hall as an eerie, blue-green glow illuminated the throne. Before Link's eyes, a towering Stalfos materialized, its skeletal form wrapped in regal attire, a long, flowing robe now tattered with time, and atop its head, a jagged golden crown. In one bony hand, it gripped a long, ceremonial sword, and in the other, a heavy shield emblazoned with an ancient crest. Its empty eye sockets burned with ethereal blue fire as it slowly raised its weapon, its voice ringing out in a deep, hollow echo that filled the hall. "You dare tread upon these sacred stones? You dare bring the cursed light into my kingdom?" The chamber groaned, the walls trembling as if the very castle itself recognized the presence of its fallen ruler. "I am Igos du Ikana, king of Ikana, last ruler of the fallen empire. This land, this castle, belongs to the dead. The darkness is eternal, unyielding, unbroken." It took a step forward, the ground shuddering beneath its weight. "But you are a herald of light, an intruder in my domain. For your transgression, you must be punished." The flames in its eye sockets flared, and with a sudden, swift motion, Igos raised his sword and brought it down against the stone floor. A shockwave of dark energy rippled outward, snuffing out what little light remained in the room. Tattle darted to Link's side. "This is bad. Really bad." Link gripped his sword, steadying himself as the king of Ikana loomed over him. The king of Ikana let out a low, hollow chuckle as he lowered his sword and took his seat upon the ancient throne. His skeletal fingers drummed against the armrests, the blue flames in his eye sockets flickering as he observed Link with cold amusement. "You bring the light into my kingdom," he mused. "You think it will save you? Allow me to show you what true darkness is." From the shadows beside him, two figures emerged, their armor clanking as they stepped into the hall. They were Stalfos, their bones worn from countless battles, yet their movements were swift and precise. One wielded a massive broadsword, the other a pair of curved scimitars. They bowed their heads slightly to their king before leaping into the chamber, their weapons raised. Without hesitation, the first Stalfos swung its heavy blade, the sheer force of it sending a gust of wind through the hall. Link barely had time to sidestep before the second warrior lunged, its scimitars flashing as they cut through the air. Link raised his shield just in time to block the strike, the impact rattling his arms. He stepped back, trying to put some distance between himself and his attackers, but the Stalfos gave him no room to breathe. The one with the broadsword stomped forward, bringing its weapon down in a devastating arc. Link rolled to the side as the blade crashed into the stone floor, sending cracks through the ancient surface. The scimitar-wielding Stalfos came from behind, slashing toward Link's back. He twisted around and parried the strike with his sword, sparks flying as metal met metal. Tattle zipped above him, shouting, "You gotta take them one at a time. They're too fast together." Link gritted his teeth. She was right, fighting both at once was overwhelming. He focused on the Stalfos with the broadsword, waiting for an opening. It swung wide, and in that brief moment, Link dashed in, slashing at its ribs. His sword connected, chipping away at bone, but the warrior barely flinched. It retaliated immediately, backhanding Link with its shield and sending him skidding across the chamber floor. The other Stalfos rushed him next, its twin blades flashing down. Link raised his sword, catching both weapons in a deadlock. He strained against the force, pushing back with all his strength before managing to shove the undead warrior away. It stumbled slightly, just enough for Link to slash across its arm, severing one of its scimitars. But they weren't slowing down. The battle raged on, the Stalfos striking relentlessly, their skeletal forms darting through the dim hall like phantoms. Link fought hard, dodging when he could, blocking when he had no choice. But it wasn't enough. Every time he landed a blow, they pressed harder, their attacks unyielding. Then, as he ducked under a sweeping strike, he glanced up. The windows. Torn curtains covered them, blocking out the morning light. The castle itself was still drowning in shadow. A plan formed in his mind. He reached for his bow, knocking a fire arrow as he rolled out of the way of another heavy strike. In one fluid motion, he took aim and fired at the nearest curtain. The burning arrow streaked through the air and struck the fabric, and within moments, the dry material caught fire. Flames crackled as the curtain curled and burned away, revealing a wide gap. Sunlight poured into the hall, golden and searing. The king of Ikana gasped, his skeletal jaw tightening as he recoiled against the sudden brightness. The two Stalfos warriors flinched as well, their movements momentarily slowing as they instinctively stepped away from the light. Tattle darted beside Link. That worked. Do it again. Link didn't waste a second. He drew another fire arrow and loosed it at another curtain. Another burst of flames, and more light spilled into the chamber. The king clenched the arms of his throne, his blue eyes flickering as he watched in stunned silence. The two Stalfos, now with even less room to maneuver, growled and lunged at Link again, desperate to end the fight before the light consumed the room. Link's breathing was heavy, his grip tight around the hilt of his sword as he fought to keep up with the two relentless Stalfos warriors. The light filtering into the chamber gave him an advantage, forcing them to move more cautiously, but they were still dangerous. Their blades clashed against his, each strike sending jolts through his arms. As Link dodged a powerful downward strike from the broadsword-wielding Stalfos, he raised his mirror shield on instinct. The gleaming surface caught a ray of sunlight from the uncovered window, sending a blinding beam directly into the warrior's body. The moment the light touched it, the Stalfos let out a guttural groan, its bones shaking violently before exploding into a pile of dust and shattered remains. Tattle gasped. Whoa! That worked! Realizing what he had to do, Link pivoted toward the second Stalfos, adjusting the angle of his shield. The remaining warrior hesitated for just a second, but it was too late. Another beam of light struck its form, and just like the first, it shuddered violently before bursting apart, bones clattering to the stone floor. Link lowered his shield, catching his breath, but before he could celebrate, a deep growl filled the chamber. The king of Ikana slowly rose from his throne, gripping the hilt of his massive, rusted sword. The blue flames in his eyes burned fiercely as he stepped forward, his skeletal form radiating fury. You dare desecrate my warriors? His voice echoed, laced with venomous rage. Then you shall fall by my blade. He moved with terrifying speed, rushing Link with his sword raised high. Link barely lifted his own weapon in time to block the downward slash, the impact sending him stumbling back. The king wasted no time, swinging again, this time forcing Link to roll to the side to avoid the strike. Thinking quickly, Link lifted his mirror shield, aiming a beam of sunlight directly at the king's chest. But unlike his warriors, the king merely raised his own shield, effortlessly deflecting the light. Tal cursed. Figures he wouldn't go down that easy. Before Link could react, the king exhaled a cloud of dark green mist, a thick poison that spread toward him. He instinctively jumped back, covering his mouth and nose as the noxious fumes filled the air. That's new, Tattle yelped. Watch out, Link. Link dashed around the chamber, striking when he could. He managed to land a clean hit against the king's ribcage, but instead of recoiling, the king let out a sinister chuckle. Then, without warning, his head detached from his body. The flaming skull floated high above the battlefield, cackling as it zipped through the air, while his body remained on the ground, still swinging its massive sword at Link. The king's skull swooped down toward Link, its burning eyes locked onto him like a predator closing in on its prey. But before it could reach him, Tattle darted in front of it, glowing brightly. Hey, bonehead. Why don't you pick on someone who isn't holding a sword? She taunted, her golden light shimmering. The king's skull hissed and veered away from her, clearly agitated by the radiance she emitted. It twisted and turned, trying to shake off her glow, but Tattle zipped around it, keeping its attention. "Link, now," she cried. Link didn't waste a second. Raising his mirror shield, he caught a ray of sunlight and aimed it straight at the king's exposed skull. The moment the beam struck, the king let out a piercing wail, his skull trembling violently before bursting apart in a flash of light. At the same time, his headless body, still clutching its sword, crumbled into dust and bones, collapsing to the floor with a final, hollow thud. Silence filled the chamber. Then, out of the lingering purple haze, the skulls of the two fallen Stalfos warriors suddenly floated back up, swirling in the air. Instead of attacking, they turned toward each other, their ghostly voices ringing out in an argument. "You fool. I told you not to stand in the light," one grumbled. "You were the one who got hit first," the other snapped. "If you hadn't been so slow, we wouldn't have lost." "Me? Slow? You're the one who couldn't even block with your sword properly." They bickered back and forth, their ghostly forms hovering in place like feuding siblings. Suddenly, the king's skull reformed, rising back up with an air of authority. "Enough," his voice boomed, immediately silencing the two warriors. "You disgrace your former glory with this petty squabbling." The two warriors hesitated before begrudgingly bowing their floating heads. "We accept our defeat, O king," they said in unison. With that, their spirits faded into the air, vanishing in wisps of purple mist. The king's skull then turned toward Link, the blue flames in his eyes flickering with something new respect. The king's skull hovered in place, its ethereal eyes locked onto Link with a solemn weight. His voice, no longer filled with rage or pride, now carried the wisdom of a ruler who had long accepted his fate. "Believing in your friends and embracing that belief by forgiving failure. These feelings have vanished from our hearts." The air in the ruined hall was heavy with the echoes of his words. Tattle drifted slightly closer, unusually quiet as the king continued. "The doors to the stone tower have been opened, and with them, darkness has poured into the land of Ikana. This castle, our castle, is but a shadow of what once was. The true source of the curse that plagues this land lies beyond those doors." Tattle let out a frustrated sigh. "Wait. What?" she huffed. "So this isn't the temple? We went through all of this and we're not even there yet." The king was unfazed by her irritation, focusing on Link. "In order to return the light to Ikana, the door to the temple must be sealed once again. This is the task that falls upon you." Link nodded, gripping his sword. The weight of his quest pressed even heavier now, but he stood firm, awaiting the king's next words. The skull dipped slightly in what might have once been a regal bow. "I can only give you this, the gift of a heartless soldier. It will help you on your journey to Stone Tower." As he spoke, a deep, resonant melody filled the chamber. Link instinctively pulled out his ocarina, feeling the notes settle into his mind. He played the song, each note echoing like a whisper from forgotten spirits. The air shimmered around him. Then, before his eyes, something unsettling happened. Where he once stood, a statue appeared. A perfect, yet lifeless, likeness of himself, its expression eerily vacant. Tattle gasped. "That's weird." She floated closer, studying the statue's hollow gaze. "I don't like this thing." The king's skull gave a slow nod. "This is the elegy of emptiness. A song that leaves behind the form of a departed soul, a soldier without a heart. It will aid you in your path." His spectral form began to waver, the purple mist of his essence curling into the air. "Go now, warrior of light. The fate of Ikana is no longer in my hands." With those final words, the king's presence faded into nothingness, leaving Link standing alone in the chamber, the solemn melody of the elegy of emptiness still lingering in the air.